On today's episode of Gathering the Kings.
You're wondering why you're not being productive.
Yeah,
Well, it's because you're never doing anything to be productive,
that's
right?
right.
And you're not holding yourself accountable because you're always thinking, all right, well, I'll just do double tomorrow or the next day. You're always pushing that buck. But if somebody's holding you accountable, the notepad, right? How many times have you ever rolled over some of your top threes and the next day you're like, oh, it's extra
Shouldn't have
anxiety
done that.
because
Yeah.
that should never have rolled over, right? Like
Yep.
you're
Exactly
holding
right.
yourself accountable with your notepad. And
Yeah.
what's the point if I'm
Right.
making all this money? I have a beautiful 401k set up, right? I have all these things that are set up for retirement,
Yeah.
and it's just trapping me for the next 30 years. So what's the point of me working for the next 30 years, not living my life with my loved ones for a retirement trap, right? That 401k is going to be great. I have a Roth, I have all these things, but I have to kill myself in the next 30 years to get to it. And I hope I live to survive and enjoy it with my loved ones.
Yeah. What's up, everybody? I'm Chaz Wolf, Gathering the Kings podcast. Got a king here on the stage. My brother Nick. Nick, thank you so
Thanks
much.
for having me, man.
Bro, you
Thanks
got
for
to say
having
your
me.
last name for me.
Sicilian. Everybody gets scared.
I was going to
Everybody's
say
scared of
that.
it, but just go with it. It's just like the pizza, just like the island, whatever you want to call it, right?
Dude,
Everybody gets scared of it now.
yeah, man, we're 400 plus episodes in. I always ask ahead of time on the recording, but as soon as I started, I'm like, you know what? We're just gonna roll with it. Let the listeners hear me make a mistake here because it's real. It's real. But dude, great last name. Love that.
Thanks, man. Everybody's
Um,
first question is, "Are you from Sicily?" And I'm like, "No, I'm from Turkey."
yeah.
Thrown for a loop, right?
And it doesn't even matter. You just stick with it. Don't laugh. Just turn the other way. Let them think what they think, right?
But they'll get a, oh, okay, and like on to the next thing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Nick, tell us what kind of business that you have. I know you've got just an incredible background. We're gonna get to that, but tell us what you're up to now today.
So I have a couple different businesses actually. I'm an entrepreneur, so I would have a roofing company. We have a real estate business, right, where we buy, sell, invest, rentals, sub twos, everything. And then we have a educational platform also where we do local. We have a local in DFW market private mastermind that we also do. And now
And
we're
that's for
actually,
investors, right?
yep, yep, all for business investors. So we're gearing toward real estate, but we're opening up for business owners in general, right? Because leads are leads and leads are,
Yeah.
sales. So
Yeah, and we can talk a little bit more about that, but I do know that from that perspective of investing, it's not just buying an asset, real estate or a business. It's about really a portfolio and investing at a high level. And so there's a strategy to that, and so I'm sure we can get into some of that as we go in the show here. But you kind of gave several pieces here. In fact, if, I feel like I'm a little bit looking in the mirror because I've got multiple industries, different businesses going on at the same time, and so that takes a little bit of a unique person to want to do different things, to win at doing different things. So, if you don't mind, tell me like why. I mean, it seems like a little bit crazy, probably to some listening, that you'd be so spread out.
yeah, I'm not good at any of those things, right? Like, I'm not buying houses, I'm not selling roofs or building roofs, right? Like, what I'm good at is building out systems and teams. So
Love that.
that's kind of where when I got into this, right? I was like, all right, how can I be effective? First originally started pairing up with my brother Tony, and he's the real estate side. He's been in it for about 20 years now. So how can I help him? Well, I'm not going to go into something that has 15 years of experience and try to reinvent the wheel or show him how to buy real estate. But how I can help him is with networking and like, oh, you're not good with this? Let me fill that gap. So that's kind of how like I got into it and I stumbled into it and why I'm like, all right, why roofing now? Well, just so happens that I have another brother that's a roofer, right? And same thing, he needed help XYZ, so I can fill in those gaps.
Yeah.
Um, it's just putting yourself and your specialties to use.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we
I was gonna
always
say
do the
genius.
practice skill matrix. So that's what we swear by.
Love it, man. Yeah, you're absolutely right. The specialty or, working genius of sorts, like if you stay in your lane. A lot of what I heard you say is that you've lowered ego and you've just been a humble kind of almost utility player. But from the outside, that's maybe what people see. That's what I just heard. But I know being in your position also, kind of just being where I've Okay, I know I'm good at these things, similar to you, and so I can add value in these ways. It's not just a utility player. There's an actual skill set or a genius to systems, scaling, teams, networking, like all the things that you just said that you're really good at. Why do you think, or what's the deep piece of you where those things make you come alive, as opposed to the roofing or the real estate, the tactics of it? You know what I mean?
Mhm. No, so for me, everything's very, I don't want to say analytical, but it's ones and zeros, right? Like it's a yes or no, right? I can do this or I can't do this. If you tell me you can't do this, right? If we're like, oh, I can't run a mile, why? Right? I want to know, like, oh, your leg is broken. Okay, no, like I don't care. You can walk or crawl a mile, but why can't you? So if there is a zero there, it better be a damn good reason. And I'm very brutally honest about that, right? Too. So it just comes down to it. And listen, what are you doing? What are you looking for? We're in sales, so you find your prospect or your avatar, right? What you're trying to look for, and you just go right at them, right? So whatever you're trying to sell, if I'm looking for distressed sellers, right? That's what we're doing. We're just going straight at them. Don't pigeonhole and try to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
So.
A lot of opportunity in what you just said. What before I go into your backdrop a little bit, tell us after all the success. I mean, you've positioned yourself well, multiple companies, living in your genius, as you say, and so why still keep going? Why push? Why are you at it even today?
Them two behind me. Honestly, that's what I got into it. Before I was an entrepreneur, I was working the 9 to 5, but I was working it 10 times over, right? I was a merchant marine, so I was away from them. I was away from life for up to 10 months out of the year.
Yeah, wow.
Making great money, don't get me wrong, but what's the point if I'm not spending it with my loved ones, right? So what keeps me going? And it's just my desire to keep building things. Listen, if I was going to retire, I would still build things. I would still dilly daddle, right? If me and the wife went to the beach, I would still be sitting there on my phone, messing with people and trying to make connections. So the whole facade of retiring, it appeals to some people, but I think it's more so built up around age. But
Yeah. Yeah, I think that there's entrepreneurs who definitely want to quote unquote sit on the beach and retire. But I don't hear you saying that. And I definitely don't ascribe to that either. What my belief is that as a doer, it sounds like you're a doer, that you love building things. When I resonated or when I settled my spirit down into the fact that I am a builder, whether I'm physically building something with my hands or a business or a team or I'm investing, whatever it is that I'm doing as far as putting something together, that is what I love. That's what we're always going to go after. So I'm just hearing you say that you recognize your identity as someone who's always going to be building something. And if you stopped building, AKA what we call retirement, then you wouldn't actually be filled with joy.
I mean, most of the people wilt away and die, right? Like a body at
Yeah.
rest, that whole theory, right?
Yeah.
So, mm,
Yeah. We'll take it beyond a theory and say, like that's true.
mhm. Yeah, exactly.
Things that don't get used die.
Mhm.
Let's just say it pretty plain. So, okay, well, let's go to your backdrop just a half second here. You kind of mentioned you were working the 9 to 5, had a pretty unique career. Tell us a little bit about that. What was that like?
So I grew up on Long Island. You would think that I was a rich boy with boats, but I wasn't. I was a poor boy. And then I went to college, SUNY Maritime, got my engineering degree from there. I go the whole talking about boats because everybody at SUNY is like a rich boy from like used to ships, and now all of a sudden they're going to maritime for a reason. I was just looking for an engineering school, and it was a good one. So I got on. Next thing you know, I'm working out in the middle of the ocean doing that 9, 10 months out of the year. I did that for a couple of years. And then my Damon, my oldest, right? He was he had some issues. He was nonverbal until he was about 4. So there were times where I'm leaving for work for months out of the year. Right. I'm about to
Yeah.
leave for 4 months and I'm like, all right, buddy, I love you. I'll talk to you later, And he would say, I don't love you, I love mommy. Right. Like he would say that to me. And all right, you little bastard, right? Like, and then you leave and that
Right.
hurts, right? So it was getting too much. It was getting too hard. And again, what's the point if I'm
Right.
making all this money? I have a beautiful 401k set up, right? I have all these things that are set up for retirement,
Yeah.
and it's just trapping me for the next 30 years. So what's the point of me working for the next 30 years, not living my life with my loved ones for a retirement trap, right? That 401k is going to be great. I have a Roth, I have all these things, but I have to kill myself in the next 30 years to get to it. And I hope I live to survive and enjoy it with my loved ones.
Yeah.
So I was talking to my brother Tony, and he's like, "Yo, you should just come home, get in the family business. Your wife's in title. My mom works at a title company. My brothers are all in real estate. All right. Well, I don't know anything about real estate. How the hell am I? I'm a wrench turner. I'm an engineer, right? I literally have tattoos everywhere. How am I?
Yeah.
I'm going to go from the oil field to engineering." And he's like, "You don't have to. You don't need to know anything about that. All you need to know is how to talk to people. If you can
Yeah.
go and have a conversation with people, that's all I need you to do." And I could. I can go to a bar and talk to people. And that's all networking was. So when I got into it, I got into hard money lending. I was actually a loan officer. So I went from engineering and high KV power systems to now I'm selling hard money loans, talking about interest rates and learning
Yeah.
from the fire hose. But literally, I lived my life by Cortez's sink the ships, burn the boats, burn the boats.
Yeah.
Uh, just no turning back. And
You didn't burn the actual ship that you were working on before you came
no,
back
no,
home,
no,
right?
no,
Yeah.
no, no.
Okay, good.
So
Okay, well, I love the transition there. Pretty stark difference. There's a lot of courage in that because major change of industry, major change of function, as an engineer, that's completely different than networking. What was the difficulty in that for you? I mean, obviously you did well, but tell me what the difficulty was.
it was the again, like everything I just said. I had to break chains, mental chains, right? Like I had a 401k, I had a Roth, I had all these things that my company was contributing to, right? So in
Yeah.
my head, I'm thinking, oh, these are, you know, unbelievable things. And when I left, I never, you no longer have those safety nets. That is a huge fear, right? Like that's one of those like again, I have the two kids. I get that imposter syndrome all the time. I'll have that nightmare where I'm flying on a helicopter back out to a rig, but my license is expired. I know it's expired, but everybody else on the rig doesn't know it's expired.
Oh,
So
wow.
I'm out there working on an expired license, and it's just a nightmare, right, for me. But that in my head is that, what am I doing here? This is what I should be doing. This is what I went to school for. So I'm constantly having those internal battles, right? Like
Mm.
wanting to go back to the security net, but you just got to fight it. You got to wake up every day, say, all those cheesy things, right? Like wake up every day, say five things that you're grateful for, make your bed and get to work.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
sounds stupid, but it's true.
Yeah, there's a lot of order, in that. And so I was actually going to follow that up with, how did you break the mental chains? Would you say that that was kind of the start of that, is just creating order in a new way, or were there other things that you
Yeah.
used?
No, absolutely. I'm a very regimented person from, I would say, from the background, right? Military school and engineering. I Everything goes on pen and paper. We have whiteboards everywhere. You have to get it out of your head onto pen and paper, and then from there you can play
Move it
around with
around.
it. But you
Yeah.
have to constantly be have some sort of order, right? Like get in, list your top five priorities for that day. All right, these are my hot focus items. And as your day comes along, you're going to add things to it. But
Mhm.
just having a pen and paper will make tremendous difference for people. And everybody's like, no, I got it in my head. I got it. No, you don't. You're
Yeah.
missing something.
Yeah. Yeah, most likely, always, until you take the time to write it down, then you're like, "Oh," or like myself, I've got my list. I do something very similar to what you just described, and I highlight the top 3 because those are the ones like I absolutely, and so my eyes are drawn to that highlight. I'm like, "Uh-oh, it's Wednesday." And, I got some work to do. But I guess the impact here that I want you to kind of maybe help some of the listeners. I've seen the impact not only in my life. It sounds like in yours. There's been clients of our mastermind. I'm sure clients of your mastermind that have experienced this, where they're like, "Oh, I see the power of getting it out of my head into a piece of paper or onto a whiteboard, putting it into an actual system, letting the implementation work, and go, oh, now I'm getting results." Right? But all those things are steps in the process. Obviously, you're an engineer, so help break down for the listener right now who's going, I hear you. It sounds good, but like, what do I do?
So again, it's going to sound cheesy, but I would go with the goals route, right? Like you have to know what your goals are. So, what does that mean? If you want to change your job, if you want to change your life, if you want to lose 20 pounds, if you want to learn how to ride a motorcycle, whatever the goal is, if you want to make $1 million, you have to put it down somewhere,
Mhm.
right? Put it down somewhere where you're going to see it and it's always going to be in your field of view, right? Somewhere where it's always going to just spark a mental, oh, there it is, right? And then once you set that goal, you have to sit down and reverse engineer how you're going to get to it. So if it's a 12-month goal of losing 20 pounds, right? Every month I want to lose 2 pounds, right? Plus or minus. And then step it back. All right, well, then I need to start working out once a week, twice a week, right? Like, again,
Yep.
this is very broad and very basic that I'm talking about, but
Makes sense though.
step it back into very small chunks, right? I had
Yep.
an old engineer, and you got a big rock, small hammer, just start chipping, break it into
Right.
little rocks. Just
Yeah.
keep on breaking it into little rocks. It's the only way to eat it.
What's the power as you kind of gave us two things here. You said originally you gotta get it out of my head, and then now you're talking about breaking it down.
Mhm.
And if we put these two together, it's breaking it down on paper so that it's not in my head because everything you just said, I could still do in my head. Like, oh, okay, cool. Like I'm going to lose 2 pounds a month. I'm going to work out a couple times a week. And it lives here and I just do it. Right. And it's not on the calendar. I'm not writing it down. I don't have any targets that I'm like, paying attention to, like you said, that are in front of me. What's the magic when it comes like out of the head, like you talked about the first principle, to setting those kind of micro targets and then merging those two together? What's the power for you?
Commitment, right? So the
That's
first
good.
step is always commitment. Like I was saying earlier, burn the ships. What do I mean by that? Is when I quit my job, I went to 4 years of engineering school. I sat for all my licensing, US Coast Guard licensing exams. These are very hard exams for engineering. Steam turbines, unlimited tonnage, all that fun stuff. They're comparable to, like, let's say the bar for an engine for a lawyer. When I quit, I just let my license run. I let it expire. If I tried to go back to work, I would have to start back over and renew my license. I would have to go and take all those exams and tests again. So
Yeah.
going back that route isn't an option for me, right? I pulled my 401k and I lived on that for the first 6 months and stuff, right? While I learned, I didn't give myself a something to pull back on and feel safe and then escape to.
Yeah.
So commitment is always step one. If you're not ready to commit, hold off a little. But when you are, jump wholeheartedly into it because that's the only way you're going to do.
Yeah, I was having a conversation here recently with what has become a great friendship, but started off as a client relationship. And this gentleman, he was kind of referencing the same level of commitment. He was, basically saying before he wasn't really committed. He thought he was, right? He had thought he had made that decision where he'd gone all in. But there's a difference where, for sure that no matter what, and then, it's not just like, hey, I'm going to work out. It's like, no, no, no. I'm working out. It's 3 days a week. It's at 5:15 a.m. I'm losing like it's just really dialed in and detailed. To your point, it's written down on a piece of paper that I'm looking at constantly. I'm obsessing over it. And until you get to that level, would you agree that they're just thinking about it? They're not actually committed.
Yeah, because you have to set, all right. So you have to set your plan in motion to a point where you can't back out of it. Right. So let's just go
Right.
back to the losing weight. Right. I'm gonna work out 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I'm gonna wake up at 5 a.m. This is very drastic, so I'm saying it, but you can do whatever time you want, and then set that on paper. And then when that time comes, and you're like, oh, I don't want to get out of bed. No, you're not mad at yourself. You have to because you wrote it down. You're not mad at you're mad at the plan now. It's not your fault. It's the plan. If you have problems with the plan, well, change the plan. Maybe you'll push it back to 7 o'clock and you'll do 5 days a week instead of 3 heavy days, right? Like you can always adapt,
Right.
but never you can't just cancel the plan, right?
Right.
That's the sinking. So sink or swim. You better start swimming.
Yeah, as a facilitator of your own, group, even though maybe you guys are focused around investing and maybe not fitness, I'm sure commitments of all kinds come up in discussion. And so Tell me just the power real quick. I know because obviously I'm like you. I not only do I facilitate, but I specifically put people in my life on all these check marks. What's the power of not only committing, like you're saying, and then having those little like micro commitments along the way, but then putting people there as well. What's the power there?
You mean like putting people in place to hold them accountable?
Yeah, yeah. Accountability, obviously, pressure, peer pressure. I mean, you call it whatever you want.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's one of our we have in the mastermind is we sell forced accountability, right? Like, listen, we're gonna sit down, we're gonna do a discovery call, and you're gonna say, hey, listen, my business is lacking because XYZ. I need more leads, I need more distressed sellers. Okay, well, when we sit down and we say, all right, well, are you making this many calls a week? Are you going out? Are you driving for dollars? Are you putting in the legwork? And a lot of times it comes back to no XYZ. All right, well, it's that simple. All right. You're wondering why you're not being productive.
Yeah,
Well, it's because you're never doing anything to be productive,
that's
right?
right.
And you're not holding yourself accountable because you're always thinking, all right, well, I'll just do double tomorrow or the next day. You're always pushing that buck. But if
Mhm.
somebody's holding you accountable, the notepad, right? How many times have you ever rolled over some of your top threes and the next day you're like, oh, it's
I
extra
shouldn't have
anxiety
done that.
because
Yep.
that should never have rolled over, right? Like
Yep.
you're holding
Exactly.
yourself accountable with your notepad.
Hey, kings and queens, Chaz Wolf. I want to talk to you about something that's super important to me. We put a lot of time and effort, we meaning myself and my team, into this podcast, into the content that goes out every single day. And if you have been getting any sort of value or insight from this, we want it to be able to reach other business owners too. So we would love if you would like, comment, share, leave a review, post, share again, all of the things on social media, on all the different platforms, or even on the podcast mediums of Apple and Spotify. We would love to be able to get our content into more hands, more entrepreneurs, so they can grow their business as quick as possible. Together, we are building a community of like-minded entrepreneurs who are committed to growing their businesses to new heights. So let's do this. Let's help each other. Let's help each other grow. Yeah,
It's
exactly.
simple.
You're right, it's simple, but what's simple is also easy not to do. And so you bring up an interesting, just from like a production standpoint, again, using your engineering mind here. I'm not an engineer, but I have a sales background. And so it's like anytime, 100% of the time, no exaggeration, when a sales rep that I was either training or was on my team or has been part of my companies, anytime that they're not performing, 100% of the time, there is some sort of a thing like what you're saying. I wasn't driving enough. I wasn't making enough phone calls. They think that they are. They think that they're working because they're busy, but they're not actually doing the things that are necessary to get the result that they're looking for, which seems so simple. Just do the things that get you the result. But we find ourselves busy with other things. Talk to that for a second. Is it focus? Is it commitment? Is it accountability? Is it a mixture of all these things? Like how do I win in this?
Everybody is different. That's one thing I didn't find out about until after I got into this world, right? When I was offshore, man, everybody's rough and everybody's just working, right? Like there's nobody's dealing with anxiety offshore. If you have anxiety, you just go and yell and curse and smoke cigarettes on the back deck, right? Like there's no such things as that, right? So
Yeah.
when I come here and now I'm like, well, when I'm hiring people, now I'm giving them a disc test, right? I'm seeing what type of analytical brain they are, if they're dominant, all that thing. I didn't know what the hell that was before,
Yeah.
but it's something that I had to learn and understand, right? No two people are the same. When I first got into this, I was working for a great guy in the loan industry, but he was very pick up the phone and dial. You have to make your 250 calls, XYZ. Like that didn't work for me, right? And just my brain, I needed to time block stuff like that. So
Right.
I could still do it, but I did it a completely different way. And me and him never were seeing eye to eye like that, right? Because again, it was just two different styles, and it's nothing wrong,
Right.
right? Like it was proven, but you have to understand what you're capable of. So same thing, going back to holding yourself accountable. If you know that you can't make your 250 calls, right? If you're getting lost in the weeds, doing the squirrel, right? Whatever,
That's right.
hold yourself accountable. Get get a piece of paper and say, for the next 20 minutes, I'm going to call as many people and then I'm going to go fuck off for the next hour. Pardon my
Yeah.
French. But you're going to go do something for the
Yeah.
next 30 minutes. You're going to reward yourself, but then you're going to sit back down
Yep.
and you're going to hit it for the next 30 minutes, right?
Yep.
Whatever it is, right? Think about it in sports, right? Doing wind sprints. Do them, get them out of the way, and then go sit down.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great analogy. I used to have a sales guy on my team. We use a culture index, so similar to DISC, but there's a few additional pieces that they survey that I really like about the culture index that the DISC doesn't do. But one of which is called the energy units. And so I had this sales rep who, based on the profile and then as well as the energy units, it was just really low. And it doesn't mean that he's a bad guy. I'm still great friends with him today. But I needed him to do things a little different. So two things that I did with him was number one, he had a standing desk. He was the only guy that as I made sure that the company, I went out of my way. I was like, I need this guy right here to have a standing desk because when he sat down, he would slouch back in his chair. And not because he was a lazy individual, he wanted to win. It just the design of how his human is. Okay, fine. So I need you to stand up. And then on the hour, every hour, he would step outside and get a 3 to 5 minute like refresher of sunlight, glass of water, and then he'd come back like on the hour, every hour without fail. He didn't want to. I'm like, no, no, no. You are going outside
Yep.
because I needed him to refresh those battery, those energy units. And it's okay once you understand. That's what I'm hearing you say is once you understand who you are, then it's like, oh, okay, well, I just need to create a system that works for me. I still have to make the phone calls or whatever the activity is that's going to get me the result. I just need to figure out a way that works for me. It may not be exactly like Nick. It may not be exactly like Chaz. It may not be exactly like that guru who's telling me, I got to do it all in this order. But okay, so instead, I'm going to time block and I'm going to give myself a little reward or whatever in between. But
Mhm.
I got to make it work for me. Am I hearing you right?
No, absolutely. You have to sit there and hold yourself accountable, right? But also, as we grow, because I'm not only am I constantly holding myself accountable, I'm trying to hold everybody out there accountable. And
That's right.
I understand every one of my guys are all different. So I, like you were just saying, I treat everyone different. Some I'm harder on, some their, love language is yelling, right? Like getting yelled at, right? So everybody has their own strengths, weaknesses, personality types, right? You have to
That's right.
be able to work with them, right? Don't hire somebody for a position if they're not mentally there for that, right? You don't take an extrovert or you don't take an introvert and put them in an extrovert position, right? You're just
Right.
going to you're going to burn more money and try to force that person to change than anything.
Yeah. Yeah. You're going to burn the person
Yeah.
eventually. Okay, so you've given us actually a lot of things that you've done proactively in your business, the ability to make really great moves. Do any of these stick out as, like, wow, this was probably just the most impactful, or maybe a decision that you've made that you haven't shared with us where you would just do it over and over and over and something that we can go implement in our business?
Team meetings, I think, is something that you need to have.
Okay,
But at the same time, not too many. I
good.
know some companies try to do team meetings once a day, once, twice a day, right? Before work, after work. You'll burn people out. With that being said, we do Monday touch meetings, right? So everybody comes in and touches for the week, right? First thing, how was your week? How was your weekend, right? Touch on home and then moving forward, what do we have planned? What are we following up with from last week? And then everybody goes and does their job, right? Like,
Yeah.
don't micromanage, but that whole thing for me was life changing. In the beginning, Tony and I we were stepping over people. We were he was doing his job, I was doing my job, and then he would do my job, and I would do his job, and then just because we thought somebody was catching it, and then we would drop a ball, and then finally we were like, all right, let's come together, let's start having more regular meetings, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And like I was saying earlier, once you start systemizing it and treating it like a business, the sooner the better, right? A lot of
Yeah.
times people want to get into these things and like I'm gonna start doing X, I'm gonna start selling, but they never treat it like a business. They start doing it as a side gig and then they'll
That's right.
start doing it full time. But one of the best things I've ever heard was always you always have to build out your foundation. Otherwise, it's your business before you start scaling. Otherwise, you're going to scale chaos, and if
That's
you're
right.
scaling chaos, you're just going to collapse.
Yeah,
So
it's not
that
good for
is
you.
That was a huge one.
Okay, so here we are, the listeners, they're like, okay, I gotta put some meetings in place, but not too many meetings. There was a comment that I heard the other day. I was in a training, and they said that meetings are the playground or the graveyard for leaders, and meaning that this is where you either make or break a lot of things. Like you said, you can either bring clarity, which then activates confidence, and hey, here we go, we're on the same page. You're going this way, I'm going this way. This is what we're trying to accomplish. Or there's confusion, or there's even too many meetings, and now I'm just burnt out. And so, what's the first thing that the listener should do if they're listening to you right now? Maybe they're in that mode where they're not treating it like a business, meaning they're not taking it serious enough to meet with their people regularly. What would be the first thing that they should do?
Listen, even if you're a one stop shop, sorry, that's not even the right analogy. Even if you're a one man show, there
There
you
you
go.
go.
Even if you're a one man show, wake up in the morning, grab a cup of coffee, sit down in the morning, and have a meeting with yourself,
Let's go.
right? Like, go over the day. You have to sit down and break down what you're going to, right? The second you start doing that, you will be more productive, right? You will start saying, "Oh, well, actually, I have a pretty easy day today. I can fill in spots here, there, or the other, right?" Or, "Oh shit, I have a very busy day," or you might start to find weaknesses, and then that's when you're like, "All right, well, I can start implementing other things to fix
Yeah.
it." So, just giving yourself 15 minutes. That's all you need. Doesn't have to be an hour. Doesn't have to be long. Listen, in the oil field, we have 150 people on the rig at one time, and every day we're working 12-hour shifts. We do two meetings. So you wake up, you go to breakfast, you go down, and you have a 15-minute meeting with the entire rig that's going out for the next 12 hours. And everybody on that rig knows what every other department's doing for that day, just so they're not stepping on toes. And it's quick, it's meaningless, it's very efficient. And then they go out and throw wrenches
Get it
at
done.
each other and a bunch of grease monkeys, right? Like, they're just pure mayhem. But you're very controlled. You're setting up your meeting for that day, and you're going out and crushing your goals. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that clarity is what I hear you saying that is the major benefit there. And for those that are listening that feel like they're chasing their tail all the time, which is a lot of entrepreneurs a lot of times until you start putting some of these very simple things in place. But it's like, I have to be able to connect in the right ways, or even with my team, even if you scaled and you have a team of 5 or 10 or 50. I've met a lot of entrepreneurs who have a team of 50, and it's chaos.
Mhm.
And it's like just a little bit of order, a little bit of thinking ahead, being proactive versus reactive is in essence what Nick has given to you. So slow down to speed up is another little phrase there. What about a bad decision, Nick? It's like something that, I mean, you obviously pretty calculated being an engineer, but what's something that you've done just like, dude, don't do this.
I'm hiring. So
Don't hire or
no, 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 no. So this is one of my faults, right? Like, when I was getting into it, I'm not a hiring person. I'm not an HR. So now I'm doing all these interviews, and this is before I was doing this tests and stuff like that, right?
Sure,
One of our
sure.
first hires, um, I shouldn't have hired him. It was just not a right fit, right? Like I was
Yeah,
saying, I thought it was a right fit for the job. We were trying to force a round peg in a square hole, and we lost so much money. That individual, we failed him all around, right? Like, just so, with that being said, slow to hire, quick to fire. That's always a good one. But really, going back to the making sure you're ready to scale, right? Make sure that you're that person you're going to need, and they're going to fit a role. They're going to solve something, right? But then on the same time, don't wait around for years waiting for it. I get into so many people, and they're waiting to scale, they're waiting to scale them, and I'm like, you just need to let go, right? A
yeah,
lot of times people have trouble letting go, and that's what holds them back. But it's a fine line, and I know I've been doing this wishy-washy thing where I say one
yeah,
extreme then the other, but
yeah.
make sure you're hiring for the right reasons and then treating them right. That's another thing I hear all the time. Horror
Yeah,
stories
I
on
heard you say that you didn't serve them well because you didn't have a system, you weren't ready to scale, like you're saying. And then B, because you really didn't know the description of what they were going to be doing, there was no system, then you weren't able to really find the right person. On top of that, you weren't using the personality assessment. There's just a lot of key factors that you just gave that make a really great hiring process. I mean, you kind of just alluded to it a second there, because you've been here and then here, not flip floppy. It's both and that's what I want the listener to understand. It has to be both and. You have to be ready to scale, but you can't wait forever. It can't be perfect, right? And so, if they're listening to you and they're okay, how do I know when is the perfect time? Because I don't want to scale it yet because it feels chaotic. But if I wait forever, it's never going to be perfect. There's always going to be some level of chaos. How do I know when to just go?
So for a perfect example, it's just going back to my that hire that we were just talking about. When I say I failed him, and when I hired him, I probably shouldn't. I definitely should not have hired him. I should have, declined him and then kept on searching. My fault wasn't looking and hiring the position. It was taking the first person that applied and then not understanding how to hold an interview. When we held the interview, my brother Tony did 90% of the talking, and I'm like, shut the fuck up. I'm like, no, you need them to talk, right?
Yeah,
Like, so,
but you still hired him. Yeah.
no, like these are all the red flags that we were throwing up, and I'm like,
Yeah.
so with that being said, um, pump your brakes, right? That's where it goes slow to hire, right? Interview a couple people, make sure that they are the right fit for that job. He wasn't the right fit for that job, and I was asking him to be who he's not, and that's where I set him up for failure. So again, I would have been better off not hiring him for him himself also. So it goes back to myself, right? You always got to be able to hold yourself accountable, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that some of the the action in there, or the activation maybe rather, is you have to go. Like, you learn some of that by doing it, and then you're like, "Ugh," right? So that's half of it, is that you gotta just do, you gotta take action, you gotta make decisions, you gotta hire somebody when maybe you aren't ready, or maybe it's not the right person. And so it's like you're saying, it's tongue in cheek. It's, to the best of your ability, you want to look at going, okay, when I hire this person, day one, what are they going to be doing? Because there's a lot of times I've talked to a client and they're like, well, we need to hire and I start building a sales team. Okay, great. What's the CRM? Where are your leads? Like, there's a lot of things that, and because of course you're going to want to hire a qualified salesperson. You don't want to just hire somebody brand new. Okay, fine. So that person's they're going to demand things to do their job properly. And you don't have any of those things currently. And it doesn't mean that you can't hire a guy and he can't work off of a piece of paper and a telephone. Like, that's possible too. I just mean that he's probably not going to stick around for very long.
And one of the downsides of hiring people is that they have to eat, right?
That's
So
right.
it sucks. So you have to, once you start hiring people, their food is on your mind now, right? You have to make sure that they're making a living. So be ready for it.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. All right. Well, let's talk about, I mean, you've obviously integrated family in your business from like a brother and family perspective. I'm sure there's other things that come into your thought when you think about your kids and your wife, that level of family. But I'm going to just bring family to the table for a second. And I'm just a big fan of the word obsession. We've talked a lot about that already here today, and going all in, and I think that every entrepreneur listening right now knows how to do that in their business. How have you, though, Nick, been able to do that and obsess over your kids? You already made a big decision to come back from the oil field and go all in with them, but how practically does that look for you on a daily when you're trying to obsess and grow the businesses, but yet also still be, super dad, super husband, that type of thing?
One of the one of the biggest and I didn't start doing it until January this year, but one of the biggest changes was I stopped taking my laptop home. For me,
You
that
mean
was
you mean you mean that it waited for you until the next day?
man, it was, but like again, that was I pulled myself out of sales and when I did that, but that was a huge let off, right? Like letting go and setting business hours, that's huge. And it took me a while to realize, like, you always, from a sales perspective, we want to be there for our clients because they
Right.
appreciate it, right? Like that. But what I found quickly is they don't appreciate it for that much, right? Like when times get tough, they're going to leave you, right? Like for whatever reason. So For an example, I was in mortgages, I was in loans, right? Remember hard money loans and all that? Rates went through the sky, and I was losing clients that I had for years over an eighth of a rate. And these
Mhm.
are people that I would talk to on the weekends. On Sunday, I was on vacation. One of my best clients, he would call me. I would pick up his phone on a Sunday and I would answer. I'd be like, "You're lucky it's you. Otherwise, I'm not talking to anybody." And I would be at Great Wolf Lodge working for this individual. But
Yeah.
when rates went up a little, he left, and he's like, "Oh, it's just business. You got to understand." And I said, "No, I understand that I was giving you a different treatment than what you were giving me." And he's like, "Well, you took this really personal." I was like, no, I am, but for that reason. Because at the
Yeah.
time, I wasn't. I was treating it like my entire life, and it was. But you have to be able to break the two, right? You're working and you're doing this like it is your life, like everything matters, and it
Mhm.
does. But you have to be able to disconnect, put the phone down, put whatever set aside, come home, take off your work boots,
Right.
and unwind, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I love the depiction that you gave in that story because it wasn't that your client you had this epiphany that the clients weren't as important and that you now are going to put all your focus on your family. It's just that well, first off, that there's a distinction between if I'm in business, then great. If I'm not in the business hours, then that means I'm in my family time or whatever. And then now that's my focus. That's what I heard you say. But and also it doesn't mean that now that I've got my family time designated, it doesn't mean that I don't care about my clients or that it's only business to me now. I didn't hear you say that. I heard you say that I'm going to take amazing care of you, but just in a limited way so that I can also serve the other people in my life. Did I hear that right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it took a minute for me to realize that I had people misaligned, right? Like I was putting, because again, you're chasing that dollar in the beginning, right? So it wasn't until later on that I realized like you got to realign sometimes, and always come back and recheck yourself, right? Make sure your everything is in alignment where your goals are, right? Everything.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah, I heard on a podcast the other day, and there's a gentleman speaking, and he said, the only person or people that are going to remember that you hustled for 17 hours a day are your kids. And
yeah,
now I could spin that in a good way and say that the life that you're creating that they're going to remember and the legacy and maybe the wealth generation, but at some point the 17 hours has to be just more evenly distributed. I'm not a fan of the word balance, but I am a fan of going, look, there's a period of time where maybe it does require a higher level of attention. Okay, fine. But at the end of the day, to this guy's point, my kids, same age as about yours, they're the ones I'm doing it for, and if I'm real on that, then I can be all in. I'm gonna do more. We already talked about being doers. I'm gonna do more than most because I'm dialed in, I'm focused, I got my priority list, like everything Nick's given to you guys. But then I also can do the other pieces too.
if you set it up in a way where you have everything dialed in and systemized, right? Like to an extent, it just your life ends up running on autopilot almost, right? Like
Yeah.
where you can, all right, and from this time to this time, I'm going to the gym. From this time to this time, I'm doing X. I got calls, and then it's dinner time. I'm gonna read to the kids, and then bedtime, and whatever, right? But
Yeah. Good.
setting those things in place, even for your kids, is great, right? Like my kids know if what throws me for a loop is when daylight savings changes, and then you're trying to, oh, it's time for bed, and I'm like, but it's still light out. Oh man,
Yep.
like you're trying to explain to them what the sun does, and you're like,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to brush your teeth.
That's
But
right. That's right. I've been right there in that place. It sounds like we have a pretty similar evening routine. But honestly, that's some of my most precious time. I've done that from the beginning. It sounds like you have as well. But and there have been moments where slipped in the door. I spent the 10 minutes right before bedtime, and those were just as powerful. I don't want that to always be just 10 minutes. I'm looking for 2 or 3 hours typically, but it's always been at least 10 minutes.
mhm.
So I think that there's a priority or a commitment to your point from, earlier in the show, right?
Everybody always says like, what do you love about being, your own boss or an entrepreneur or whatever you want to say? And my favorite thing in the world is just taking my kid to the office, right? Like having that freedom, yesterday I had to take him to the doctors, and then after that he had a half day, so he spent it with me, and like we just rode around, came to the office. I have a couch and TV, and just having that availability to have them in my life, right, at any time
Yeah.
from what I was used to is just night and day. So
Yeah.
people always ask me, like, would you go back offshore? You couldn't pay me. You couldn't pay me enough money to go back, right? To give up what I've built in a sense, right? And it's
Yeah.
not just because of what I built, it's my time, right?
Right.
That's what I've realized that I was giving away.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. The result of those systems that you've been so prudent in building is time. And obviously you can fill that time with really special moments. Okay, I got one last question here for you, Nick, as we wrap up. I want to know, especially with you being, kind of in that similar situation that we just talked about as far as being able to go back, and you said obviously you wouldn't. If you could go back in time though, and you could whisper in the younger Nick's ear, what would you tell him?
I man, I stop being a dill hole. I I was the typical troubled child, right? You know how many people I talk to and they give me like the backhanded compliment of like, "Oh, I'm so proud of you." I never it because again, I was a troubled teen.
Yeah. Never
That
thought you'd amount to much, but here you are.
exactly. And they're so proud of me and happy. And at the same time, I hate myself for it. With that being said, I don't know if I would change it, right? Like, cause it made me who I am. So if I can go back and give myself any insight, it would be that um, mental, like the whole, what I was saying earlier, everybody's different inside. That took me until I was 30 to realize that anxiety and all of those things, they're all natural, they're all normal. And when you're having a rough moment and you're in your own head talking, you're like fighting and you're your own worst enemy, and like all of those moments, that's all noise and you're giving it to yourself. And it took me a while to realize that. So if I can go back and whisper anything, it would be, hey, listen, it's normal. Just keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a picture of you just like, quiet down. It's okay.
Yeah, it's just things will get better. You just gotta keep on going. Right. The only time they don't get better is if you stop.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. I heard a quote, I don't know, a couple months ago that makes me think of this moment where it said, life will get better and better forever and ever. And it was just like, wait, say that again? Life will get better and better forever and ever. It's like, wow, man, if that's a real belief of yours, for real, if you genuinely believe that life will get better and better forever and ever, then let's keep going, right?
Mhm.
Nick, you've been incredible. First off, thank you for sharing. How can the listener find you? Number one, there's a couple different things that you got going on. You're in the DFW area. If they need roofing services, if they need real estate services, if they want to learn how to do what you do in real estate, you've got soft products for them to be able to learn. If they're investing and they're in real estate and they want to join a mastermind group, how can they find you?
So go to REIAF. That stands for Real Estate Investing as Fuck. Try to keep everything pretty simple and confident. So reiaf.com, that's our website. That's for the mastermind. We're on YouTube. We're about to break 100,000 subscribers, the
Love it.
Sicilian Brothers. So check us out on Facebook, TikTok, all of those fun things.
It's amazing. Well, you are no short of the title of king, and so I appreciate you being here, taking your time with us, sharing vulnerably. We wish you nothing but success in all of your endeavors. Thanks for being here, brother.
I appreciate you very much for having me, man.
Thank you for listening to Gathering the Kings today. I hope that you were able to pull out a few nuggets to go apply into your business right away. More importantly, though, I hope that you're realizing that it takes more to be successful than just being by yourself, doing it all on your own, carrying the weight all by yourself. What I have realized, not only in my own journey from multiple businesses and multiple different industries, and now interviewing over 200 or 300 other very successful 7, 8, and 9-figure business owners, is that it's tough to do it alone. And so Gathering the Kings exists to bring together successful entrepreneurs. In fact, we are putting together 1,000 kings, specifically who are grateful but not done. We're intentionally assembling kings who fight tooth and nail for their business, family, and communities. And here's what we believe, that in the pursuit of excellence in those areas, that it ignites within us the responsibility to govern power and forge a lasting legacy. So if that relates and resonates with you, and you know that you need people around you, sharp, qualified, other very successful business owners, I want you to go to gatheringthekings.com. I want you to take a look at what we're doing and see if it makes sense for you to be part of our pursuit to 1,000 kings. Talk soon.